Hey everyone, this is Andrew here. We're going to talk about issue 0 of Dazzle, just some basic things about it, some little behind the scene stories, some changes that I made, some changes the artist made, things like that. So let's just delve right in to the first thing you probably see is the cover. And Dennis, the illustrator in Istanbul, did that. I gave him the idea of we need an image not from the issue, which most comics usually have an image from their issue, but we need an image of the entire comic series that's going to grab people because it's the first time and maybe the only time they'll see it. And so we took our protagonist, Annabelle, and Dennis had the idea of having her in a swing or a trapeze or something like that because we needed her in the circus. We kind of wanted to show her in the circus. And he drew this just amazing a sketch kind of looking down at her and then all the circus down below. So that was nailed it on the first attempt. So we didn't bother making any edits. We just had him color it. And that was that. As far as the issue being named issue 0, we all kind of felt that this was more a prologue, not a real story here. It's just a setup for the setting, for the ideas of using different time periods, using different actual real places, introducing characters, and giving just a glimpse of what kind of this circus is, what the circus has in it. And uh, I also didn't have, let's say, all my characters sketched out. And I didn't have a voice for all the characters because I was just starting to write for them. So I didn't really want to go dialogue heavy and just pick one or two people and make like a story about that. I felt the first issue should be more like the first 5 or 6 minutes of a movie, setting things up. So as it was kind of more of a prologue, we decided let's call it issue number 0, and I think it fits. So first page of the comic is actually set in 12th century Georgia. I had some people go to Georgia with me a few months ago on a tour, and this is set in this actual city called Vardzia. It's a cave city, and I'm referencing here this little girl who's saying "Ak Vardzia," which means "I'm here, Uncle." That's actually Queen or King Tamar, who's the most important Georgian in their history. And that's the name of this, where the city came from, because she would get lost and she would say in Georgian, Akbardzia, and then they called it Vardzia, which is this ancient cave city, which is an amazing place to visit. And I just wanted a real location to set things up. And Vibor, who's the colorist for this issue, did a great job because he decided to go with this kind of blue and greenish look, and very very dark, which looks quite different from the other color palettes once we move into Romania later on in the story. So because I knew there wasn't going to be a real story to this, I also knew there wasn't going to be a lot of dialogue. And on top of that, we set some rules up, which is no thought bubbles. Like, oh, I'm thinking about this. Like, you can't read the mind of characters like a lot of comics do, and we didn't want to have narrative text saying, hey, back in the 12th century, in the fortress, the so-and-so is coming to collect some money, blah, blah, blah. We just want to show things visually or have characters give dialogue, and that's it. So there's not a whole lot of words spoken. I think there's about 160 words altogether in this issue. But I want to get the idea here that we have one character who's going to show up later on in the story at a much later date, hired by these generals to do something. We don't exactly know what it is, and it was my friend Igor who designed a lot of these characters and actually did all the pencil work for this first issue. He said, well, other than just gold, he should be getting something else, asking for something else. And he said, well, why doesn't he like ask for, like, I don't know, like a person, like a kid? Because that's just bizarre, and people would be like, what's this all about? And to be honest, it worked really well because I have a character in mind for later on in the story, and I thought, oh, well, this could be like that character, but 800 years before that character shows up again. So I really like that idea. And there's the idea that, hey, there's magic going on in the circus. This character has some powers, but there's some component he needs to be able to, as you turn the page, turn the enemy army into frozen statues, basically, that get diced up and cut up by the Georgian army. And I didn't really want to show a battle. The point of this was not to have a battle scene. I just wanted to show the aftermath of saying, oh yeah, this guy's got some strange powers, and there's some little girl or little creature that has something to do with it, which people just have to wait on later on in the storyline to find out what all that means. And then we switch over to a very different color palette, which is Romania, Transylvania, in somewhere in the 20th century, because we see there's a tram there. And as some people might have noticed, there's a little horse cart at the bottom right corner of this first page. And one of the artists said, well, I don't know. We're supposed to be in the 20th century. I was like, well, okay, but like that's Romania still in its 21st century. So um, anyway, I really wanted to show just how enormous the circus was, because my idea of a traveling circus is there's not an actual separate tent, that the circus actually becomes part of the city, or I should say the city becomes part of the circus, and you just have a tent over part of the old town or the city, or whatever part of the town it's going to be in. And then I just wanted to kind of follow in with the character to get into from this bird's eye view shot into the actual town covered up with the circus tent. So I decided, since one of the characters was going to have a pet that flew, I decided let's make it an owl. So we follow the owl in, and then it lands on Snow, who's there to receive the owl. And she's from Kazakhstan, and she has a little line in Kazakh language, which we translate. And my idea for the comics is we'll have plenty of people who speak different languages, and that we'll usually have them say a few lines of dialogue in their own language with the English subtitle below, and then just switch over, because I really don't want people to read subtitles for the entire comic, but it's also a good way to introduce other languages and other alphabets and things like that. And then I wanted to introduce Sword's, let's say, main love interest. Snow's main love interest, who is Sword, who's the guy who comes in to greet her. We just see a bunch of swords on the wall there, and then just a hint, but trying to build a few little relationships without going into details, because I've got 30 other issues to do all that. But one of the things I wanted to do was, because I'm kind of setting up the circus and setting up what's going on there, I thought, well, I might as well show people setting up the actual circus. So we're going to have a character or characters that are human cannonballs. So I thought, well, we'll have some guys moving the cannons and have a little silly dialogue, have the foreman getting angry at them because they're not working fast enough. Just a few things like that, like everyone's getting things set up. And so the next page we have a very peculiar looking stage with, looks like a person drawn up on a bunch of strings. And there's a sign that's written in Romanian, which I believe is correct, hopefully, Marioneta Teatru, which means marionette theater. And that's just to put in the back of your mind for later issues when I'm going to do something with that. But just to kind of show you that maybe this isn't just your typical circus that's coming to town. And that might be obvious also by the fact that there's a guy flying above them quite high up. You can see he's past the roofs all the way close to where the tent is, and we have an idea that that must be pretty high in this setting. We actually had a different drawing in the top third panel, which was kind of static and didn't add much, so we a little improvised on the fly and was able to add in another character who otherwise wouldn't make it into this issue, and gives it a much better dynamic this way. Then we have a couple pages where we're introducing other characters. One of them I think everyone's already seen before at the very beginning of the story. And we're showing this character who we don't exactly know who he is. He's getting the robe put on him, or the cape put on him. He's alluding to the fact that he was in this town in Romania back in Vlad's day, and that is Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad Țepeș. And this is actually the hometown of one Vlad Țepeș. It's called Sighișoara in Romania. Actually, you can go there today and eat at a restaurant where Vlad Țepeș, or Vlad the Impaler, was born. But anyway, just to kind of show that this person's lived through all these different time periods and perhaps even has met some of these people. And I also introduce a person who's getting some sharpened knives for one of the circus acts. And then we come back and we meet Snow and Sword again, and I wanted to give the impression or the idea how high up they are, because Sword's quite high up and she's down below but still quite high up, just to kind of give you the kind of grander size of the entire thing. And they have their little playful banter, as couples sometimes do. And then I needed to introduce another character, but I didn't actually want to show her fully in this issue, so I just said, let's go with the shadow, and her shadow is kind of strange and menacing, and that's what happens in the next little scene where people are drinking beer and are like, ooh, who the heck's this? And spinning their beer out and grabbing each other and screaming. And hey, guess what? You want to see who that is? She'll be in the next issue. And then we're on to, let's say, the real action piece of the entire comic. And originally, I was going to make this much more grandiose and have, I don't know, 12 people all being fought by this woman who's putting her makeup on and having a glass of wine before the circus. This is Tsisana. She's a Georgian ballerina. She, as real Georgian ballerinas have, they have all these long braids, and I made her hair a little special because everyone has, let's say, some special magical talents in the circus. And she's kind of, let's say, the fighter, the one who usually has a bad temper. And she's very calm. She has a knife in her back, and she's just doing her makeup and kind of egging on these thugs who just want to steal the money, but maybe they're going to get something else other than the money. And unfortunately for them, it's not going to be sex. It's going to be some broken wine bottles, smashing them up. And I thought, hey, if I'm gonna use some wine bottles and I run wine tours, I really should spend some time and make one of the wine bottles like something from an actual winery. So I gave my artist in Istanbul, Dennis, a label for Križ Winery, which is in Dalmatia. They have an amazing macerated wine called Gurk. That's the name of the grape. And anyway, it's one of my favorite wines, and I thought, well, I'll put that in there. And he actually drew the label exactly how it is on the actual wine bottle. So that's one of those great detail things. If you know what it is, you can zoom in on it and be like, oh, damn. Yeah, that's exactly how the label looks. So she gets to have some fun, beat up these guys. And I'm very fortunate I didn't put this huge action set piece in there because that would have probably been too much. And then I would have had to try to top it in the next issue. So I've saved it. I've already put it in script for issue 17. So it's going to be a ways down the road. But I wanted to give people an idea of, like, other than maybe doing some amazing things in the circus or having a few different abilities, that some of these people are obviously quite adept at fighting. And then, unfortunately, Raga, who's the human cannonball lady, she walks in and is like, oh, not again. Like, this happens all the time. And her favorite wine bottle got broken by Tsisana. So it's just a little humor there. And then I basically have a couple pages to introduce the ringmaster, who you've already seen, and his panther, because they were in Georgia and now they're here in Romania 800 or so years later. And he gets to go up on his clock tower, which looks pretty much how the clock tower in Sighișoara, Romania, actually looks like, and kind of gets to present the circus to everyone. And he says, for your pleasure, which is the name of the issue. And I think I'm always going to try to get the name of the issue into the actual dialogue somewhere here. This one fit relatively easily. And then I wanted to show at least like one circus act, kind of all the way through, to get an idea of what they do when they're performing for the audience in the comic book, and kind of how the audience reacts. So we have Tsisana again. She's strapped onto the wheel of death, getting spun around, and then we meet the gentleman who was getting the knives sharpened earlier on in the comic. That's Tsar, and obviously he's quite talented at throwing knives quickly and not hitting Tsisana wrapped up. And then when he runs out of knives and daggers to throw, he takes his shirt off, and he has tattooed daggers on him, and then somehow, miraculously, he kind of takes them off his body and uses them and throws them there, and Tsisana kind of reciprocates by taking all those that he's thrown and throws back at him. And the audience is like, what? This is not your normal knife throwing act. And he catches them, and voila, they're back on his body as tattoos. As one of the main ideas I had going into this was using tattoos on all the different characters, either kind of signifying something about them or giving them some powers, or them having the ability to use the tattoos to do something physically with them. And one of the nice things really about doing a collaborative process is you don't actually have all the ideas, and other people have their own ideas that they put in. And sometimes, like with me, I didn't even see this until 2 days before it went to print, is seeing this in color. We see Tsar there, and he's got the tattoos back on him. It almost looks like the blue paint from those tattoos are splattered across his chest. And I really love that effect. I'm not sure if that was his intention or what, but it was not an idea I had, and I really like it. So that's something perhaps I will use with other characters and other tattoos in the comic. And for me, that was going to be the end. That was going to be the end of the comic because in my mind, and since I'm not a comic guy and I've never written one before, that well, this is this is kind of an exciting little scene to have at the end. And I think honestly, if this was a film or TV episode, that wouldn't be a bad way. Everyone's cheering, yay, and okay, these two people aren't going to hurt each other, and wow, they're very interesting, and they've got some cool, unique talents. But no, we need a hook. We need something so people are like, well, wait a sec. I thought everything was fine, and then there's this, and something to kind of bring them back for the next issue, leave them wondering what's going to happen. And so we took one of the characters that we hadn't introduced yet, Mystic, and who's doing tattoos, and we have her doing a tattoo on this boy, and all of a sudden something happens to her physically, and she's sick, and she keels over in pain, and then falls to the ground. And that's that. And well, why is that? And to be honest, I want to put something that's significant, not trivial, and that's a good precursor to things that will happen with this character in the next few issues. So people then gonna be like, oh, okay, now I understand why she got why she had some problems at the end of the first issue. Of course, one of my artists suggested that perhaps no mom in their right mind would take their kid to a tattoo booth with this lady who tattoos people with her fingernail. But hey, if you're going to a crazy magic circus like this, and considering some of the stupid thing parents do, I don't think it's too out there that someone would bring their child and let them have it tattooed. I mean, people let their kids ride all those carnival rides, and we all know the some of the drugged up crazy people who run those. So anyway, those are just weird conversations you have, and you're like, oh yeah, I never thought of it like that. But anyway, the story is not about the mom who's worried about her kid getting tattooed. It's about everything else in this character who's all of a sudden has some issues. So there we go. We think we're pretty much done with the comic, right? The fortunately the artist suggested I needed to add a little bit more, but then wait, we kind of messed up because this being our first comic, we miscounted. We only had 31 pages, and you really should have 32 pages. Since you're going to have 32 pages, you might as well have something on each of the pages. And that was something we didn't really notice until 2 weeks or so before we went to print, and everyone was busy doing their jobs, and I wasn't going to try to rewrite a new scene or add an extra page of something into one of the other scenes. So I decided, well, a lot of comics, they have the next issue is called this. And I thought, well, we have a whole page. Let's make a nice kind of retro style poster saying next issue is called If You Want It. And you could take a look at it and be like, oh, okay, it looks like it's going to take place in a different place. And hopefully maybe get the idea it takes place in a different time period. Next issue will be taking place on the Yugoslav Adriatic. So, people who can bother learning a little bit of history or reading something might know that that's probably going to be someplace in the first half of the 20th century. So it worked out pretty nice. And to be honest, I think if people like this, then maybe for the other issues we'll have the last page being kind of an advert in some kind of poster way or postcard or something a little bit visually clever than just a picture from the other drawing from the other issue, and we'll continue doing that. And then at the very end of basically the inner page of the back page is the Dazzle logo. And I was trying to design just something for it a few months ago, and I was actually in Turkey with my group, and we were heading to Georgia, and I thought, oh yeah, Georgian alphabet is really beautiful. I mean, it's like beautiful calligraphy. And the Georgian D for Dazzle is just a really beautiful character. And I thought, if I took the Georgian D and added a dagger through it, because, well, let's say in this circus and the kind of characters I have, it's more daggers and swords. It's not guns and high-tech weapons and stuff like that. So figured that'll be good. So if those of you who can read the Georgian alphabet might recognize that's the little Dazzle logo is a nod to my friends in Georgia and the fact that I decided to set the first issue there. So that kind of sums up. This is what it is. Uh, I know before we even printed it, we were all kind of aware that like, wow, there's really very little dialogue or anything written in here, um, which in some ways is fine. In other ways, I also know because I've written other scripts that okay, yeah, well, we're probably going to be a little bit more normal going forward as far as dialogue goes. Um, but I just wanted to set everything up here, and I'm hoping that I'm going to perk everyone's interest enough with the characters and the settings and things that are kind of vague and not completely answered because I really don't want to answer everything every issue, and I don't want to wrap everything up every issue, that there's going to be enough for people to want to come back for future issues. So thanks for listening. And if you like this will be something I do probably twice a month for my Patreon members. We'll be doing podcasts not just on some of the issues, but on various characters or how certain things came to be, different influences that kind of factored into how the whole process went, and kind of just A to Z on stuff, maybe even a few talks with some of the artists, stuff like that. So I will be launching Patreon in January, and I'll put that on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're interested, you could see all the list of perks, and one of the ones will be podcasts. So thanks for tuning in.